Listen to these sentences. I must immerse myself in my studies to improve quickly. I have a voracious curiosity about the world, so I'm always asking questions. When my friend asks me a difficult question, I sometimes equivocate because I don't want to give a wrong answer. The weather here is so capricious. It's sunny one minute and pouring rain the next. My profligate spending on coffee last month left me with no money for books. I am parsimonious with my free time, so I only use it for the most important activities. The child became querulous and started whining when it was time to leave the playground. My new classmate is very taciturn, so I find it difficult to start a conversation with him. Seeing a typewriter in a modern office feels like an anachronism. To improve my health, I will eschew sugary drinks and only drink water. I appreciate my teacher's laconic instructions because they are clear and easy to remember. The critic's vitriolic review of the film made me not want to see it. My dream of becoming a famous actor is probably quixotic, but I will still try. The inexorable progress of technology means I must keep learning new skills. My teacher was magnanimous in victory after our class debate and praised my good points. A sudden political scandal can precipitate the fall of a government. As an iconoclast, she loves to challenge traditional teaching methods. My father will lambaste me if I fail my exams because he expects me to do well. The sunny weather is an auspicious start to our language learning trip. I need to be pragmatic about my goals. I can't become fluent in English in 1 month. You cannot gainsay the fact that daily practice is the best way to learn. He is a zealous supporter of our study group and always encourages everyone. In my culture, we venerate our elders and always seek their advice. The recalcitrant student refused to do his homework, no matter what the teacher said. Her acerbic sense of humor is funny, but it can sometimes hurt people's feelings. He was obdurate in his belief that his method was the only correct one. I am reticent to speak in English class because I'm afraid of making mistakes. My aunt is so loquacious that once she starts talking, it's hard to get her to stop. The hegemony of English as a global language is both an advantage and a challenge for learners. I have decided to abjure using online translators and will only use a dictionary. The supercilious look the fluent speaker gave me made me feel insecure. His polemical essay argued that grammar is unimportant, which started a big debate in class. Drinking a cup of tea helps to assuage my anxiety before a test. I feel a strong antipathy towards memorizing long lists of words without context. After studying for 6 hours straight, I was overcome with a feeling of ennui and couldn't focus anymore. The didactic nature of some children's shows is designed to teach lessons, not just to entertain. He is a sycophant who always agrees with the teacher just to get a better grade. Politicians often prevaricate when asked a direct question about a difficult topic. I find most television commercials to be vapid and uninteresting. After a large lunch, I often fall into a torpor and find it hard to study. The mendacious advertisement claimed I would become fluent in a week, which is a lie. Going for a walk in the park is a salubrious activity that clears my mind for studying. She has a mordant wit, and her sharp observations about language learning are very accurate. The thief managed to abscond with a valuable dictionary from the library. I accepted the invitation to the English Conversation Club with alacrity. Memorizing all the irregular verbs is an arduous but necessary task. The politician's bombastic speech was full of impressive words, but had no real substance. The city center was a cacophony of traffic, music, and people shouting. Let's talk about immerse. It means to absorb yourself completely. You mostly hear, immerse yourself in something. Immerse yourself in a book. Immerse yourself in a culture. Immerse yourself in a language. Immerse yourself in a project. You can also be fully immersed in something. Fully immersed in your work. Fully immersed in nature. Fully immersed in study. And you can literally immerse something in water. Let's talk about equivocate. It means to use ambiguous language to conceal the truth or avoid commitment. You mostly hear equivocate on something, equivocate about something. The witness equivocated when asked a direct question. Politicians equivocate on controversial issues. Do not equivocate. Give me a straight answer. You can also be accused of equivocating. Accused of equivocating during the debate. Tired of his constant equivocating. And you can describe a non-committal person as equivocal. Let's talk about capricious. It means given to sudden and unaccountable changes of mood or behavior. You mostly hear capricious nature, capricious behavior, capricious decision. The manager's capricious decisions made the team anxious. The weather in the mountains is notoriously capricious. He was a capricious leader, swayed by whims. You can also describe an outcome as subject to capricious forces, subject to the capricious nature of fate. A market vulnerable to capricious investors. The related noun is caprice. Let's talk about profligate. It means recklessly extravagant or wasteful. You mostly hear profligate spending, profligate use. The government was accused of profligate spending. His profligate lifestyle soon left him bankrupt. We must curb our profligate consumption of natural resources. You can also describe a person as a profligate spender. He was a profligate heir who squandered his fortune. The profligate habits of the wealthy. And it can mean licentious or immoral in a sexual context. Let's talk about parsimonious. It means unwilling to spend money or use resources, stingy. You mostly hear parsimonious with something. He was so parsimonious, he reused paper towels. The company was parsimonious with its research budget. She was parsimonious with her praise, giving it sparingly. You can also describe a theory as parsimonious, meaning it is frugal in its assumptions. The simplest, most parsimonious explanation is often the best. Let's talk about querulous. It means complaining in a whining, petulant manner. You mostly hear querulous tone, querulous voice, querulous child. His querulous complaints annoyed everyone in the room. She spoke in a high, querulous voice. The tired child became increasingly querulous. You can also describe a person as a querulous individual. An old, querulous man who found fault with everything. The querulous demands of a prima donna. Let's talk about taciturn. It means reserved or uncommunicative in speech, saying little. You mostly hear taciturn man, taciturn personality, taciturn nature. The taciturn cowboy spoke only when necessary. Her taciturn demeanor made her seem aloof. He was a taciturn but thoughtful leader. You can also be taciturn by nature. Taciturn by nature, he disliked small talk. The taciturn silence of the wilderness. Let's talk about voracious. It means wanting or consuming great quantities of something. You mostly hear voracious reader, voracious appetite. She was a voracious reader, finishing a book a day. The teenager had a voracious appetite. He had a voracious curiosity about the world. You can also describe consumption as voracious. The voracious demand for the new smartphone. A voracious consumer of information. Let's talk about anachronism. It means something out of its proper historical time. You mostly hear an anachronism in something. The electric car in a Victorian-era novel is an anachronism. The feudal practice was an anachronism in the modern state. He was a political anachronism, clinging to outdated ideas. You can also describe something as seem like an anachronism. In the digital age, a handwritten letter can seem like an anachronism. The adjective form is anachronistic. Let's talk about eschew. It means to deliberately avoid or abstain from something. You mostly hear eschew something. Eschew dogma. Eschew modern technology. Eschew violence. You can also be willfully eschew. Willfully eschew formality. Willfully eschew popular opinion. And you can literally eschew unhealthy foods for a better diet. Let's talk about profligate. It means recklessly extravagant or wasteful. You mostly hear profligate spending. Profligate use of resources. Profligate son of a wealthy family. Profligate lifestyle. You can also be morally profligate. Morally profligate character. Profligate with the truth. And you can describe a government's profligate borrowing. Let's talk about laconic. It means using very few words, brief and concise to the point of seeming rude. You mostly hear laconic reply. Laconic style of writing. Laconic speech. Laconic wit. You can also be characteristically laconic. Characteristically laconic hero. deliberately laconic in his emails. And you can describe a laconic yes or no answer. Let's talk about anachronism. It means something out of its proper time in history. You mostly hear a political anachronism. The film was full of anachronisms. Feel like an anachronism in the modern world. You can also be glaring anachronism. A glaring anachronism in the novel. Hopelessly anachronistic idea. And you can literally point out an anachronism, like a wristwatch in a Roman sculpture. Let's talk about capricious. It means given to sudden and unaccountable changes of mood or behavior. You mostly hear capricious nature, capricious leader, capricious weather, capricious gods in mythology. You can also be notoriously capricious in his decisions. A capricious and unpredictable boss. And you can describe the capricious winds of fate. Let's talk about vitriolic. It means filled with bitter criticism or malice. You mostly hear vitriolic attack, vitriolic comments, vitriolic speech, vitriolic response. You can also be downright vitriolic. His tone became downright vitriolic. A vitriolic diatribe against the government. And you can describe a critic's vitriolic review. Let's talk about quixotic. It means exceedingly idealistic, unrealistic, and impractical. You mostly hear quixotic quest, quixotic attempt, quixotic campaign, quixotic nature of the project. You can also be endearingly quixotic. His quixotic pursuit of justice. A quixotic dream of world peace. And you can describe a person as a quixotic figure. Let's talk about parsimonious. It means unwilling to spend money or use resources. You mostly hear parsimonious father, parsimonious lifestyle, parsimonious with compliments, parsimonious budget. You can also be frugal to the point of parsimonious. The parsimonious allocation of funds, parsimonious in his habits. And you can describe a parsimonious portion of food. Let's talk about inexorable. It means impossible to stop or prevent. You mostly hear inexorable decline, inexorable rise of technology, inexorable progress, inexorable march of time. You can also be seemingly inexorable. The seemingly inexorable forces of globalization. An inexorable logic to the argument. And you can describe a disease's inexorable advance. Let's talk about magnanimous. It means very generous or forgiving, especially toward a rival or less powerful person. You mostly hear magnanimous gesture. Magnanimous in victory. Magnanimous leader. Magnanimous offer. You can also be surprisingly magnanimous. She was surprisingly magnanimous toward her critics. A magnanimous peace treaty. And you can describe a person's magnanimous spirit. Let's talk about precipitate. It means to cause an event or situation to happen suddenly, unexpectedly, or prematurely. You mostly hear precipitate a crisis, precipitate a war, precipitate the collapse, precipitate a downfall. You can also be precipitated by. The riot was precipitated by years of injustice. An event that precipitated major reforms. And a single comment can precipitate an argument. Let's talk about iconoclast. It means a person who attacks cherished beliefs or institutions. You mostly hear a true iconoclast. An intellectual iconoclast. The artist was an iconoclast. Iconoclast in his field. You can also be notorious iconoclast. The notorious iconoclast challenged every tradition. Iconoclastic ideas that shook the establishment. And you can describe an iconoclastic approach to a problem. Let's talk about lambaste. It means to criticize harshly or severely. You mostly hear lambaste the opposition. Lambaste the government's policy. Lambaste him for his mistakes. Lambaste the company and the press. You can also be publicly lambasted. Publicly lambasted by the critics. The coach lambasted the team for their poor performance. And you can literally lambaste someone with words. Let's talk about taciturn. It means being reserved or uncommunicative in speech, saying little. You mostly hear taciturn man. Taciturn demeanor. Taciturn by nature. Taciturn response. You can also be unusually taciturn. He was unusually taciturn at the meeting. A famously taciturn film hero. And you can contrast a garrulous person with a taciturn one. Let's talk about equivocate. It means to use ambiguous language to conceal the truth or avoid commitment. You mostly hear equivocate on an issue. Politicians who equivocate. Equivocate during the interview. Equivocate to avoid blame. You can also be refused to equivocate. She gave a direct answer and refused to equivocate. An equivocating statement that satisfied no one. And you can describe an answer as equivocal. Let's talk about auspicious. It means conducive to success, favorable. You mostly hear auspicious start, auspicious occasion, auspicious beginning, auspicious signs. You can also be highly auspicious. The deal got off to a highly auspicious start, under the auspices of the university. And you can describe an auspicious date for a wedding. Let's talk about pragmatic. It means dealing with things sensibly and realistically based on practical considerations. You mostly hear pragmatic approach, pragmatic solution, pragmatic leader, pragmatic decision. You can also be highly pragmatic. We need to take a more pragmatic view. A pragmatic compromise was reached. And you can contrast a pragmatic person with a dogmatic one. Let's talk about gainsay. It means to deny or contradict, to speak against or oppose. You mostly hear hard to gainsay. No one can gainsay the evidence. Gainsay the truth of his statement. It is impossible to gainsay. You can also be without gainsaying. His contribution is without gainsaying, a fact that is not to be gainsaid. It is often used in negative constructions or questions. Let's talk about zealous. It means having or showing great energy or enthusiasm in pursuit of a cause or objective. You mostly hear zealous supporter, zealous advocate for reform, zealous pursuit of wealth, zealous in his duties. You can also be overly zealous, an overly zealous security guard, the zealous fervor of a convert. And you can describe a religiously zealous group. Let's talk about venerate. It means to regard with great respect, to revere. You mostly hear venerate a saint, venerate ancestors, venerate tradition, venerate the founder. You can also be highly venerated, a highly venerated teacher, the most venerated institution in the country. And you can describe an object held in veneration. Let's talk about recalcitrant. It means having an obstinately uncooperative attitude toward authority or discipline. You mostly hear recalcitrant child, recalcitrant student, recalcitrant behavior, recalcitrant member of the group. You can also be willfully recalcitrant, the willfully recalcitrant prisoner, recalcitrant in the face of reasonable demands. And you can describe a recalcitrant substance that is hard to manage. Let's talk about acerbic. It means sharp and forthright, especially in speech, tasting sour or bitter. You mostly hear acerbic wit, acerbic comment, acerbic tone of voice, acerbic critic. You can also be notoriously acerbic in his reviews, an acerbic take on modern politics. And you can literally describe the acerbic taste of a lemon. Let's talk about obdurate. It means stubbornly refusing to change one's opinion or course of action. You mostly hear obdurate refusal, obdurate attitude, obdurate in his opposition, obdurate heart. You can also be remained obdurate. Despite the pleas, he remained obdurate. The regime's obdurate stance on human rights. And you can describe an obdurate resistance to new ideas. Let's talk about reticent. It means not revealing one's thoughts or feelings readily, reserved. You mostly hear reticent about his past, reticent to speak, reticent by nature, unusually reticent. You can also be strangely reticent. She was strangely reticent on the subject. A reticent public figure who shuns interviews. And you can contrast a reticent person with a loquacious one. Let's talk about loquacious. It means tending to talk a great deal, talkative. You mostly hear loquacious host, loquacious guest, loquacious nature, in a loquacious mood. You can also be unabashedly loquacious, the unabashedly loquacious tour guide, more loquacious than usual after a few drinks. And you can describe a loquacious outpouring of stories. Let's talk about hegemony. It means leadership or dominance, especially by one country or social group over others. You mostly hear cultural hegemony, political hegemony, economic hegemony, challenge the hegemony. You can also be global hegemony, the global hegemony of a superpower, struggle for regional hegemony. And you can discuss the hegemony of a particular ideology. Let's talk about abjure. It means to renounce a belief, cause, or claim formally or solemnly. You mostly hear abjure violence. Abjure one's faith. Abjure his former allies. Abjure all earthly possessions. You can also be publicly abjure. He was forced to publicly abjure his statement. A solemn oath to abjure the throne. And you can literally abjure a bad habit. Let's talk about supercilious. It means behaving or looking as though one thinks one is superior to others. You mostly hear supercilious smile. Supercilious attitude. Supercilious remark. Supercilious waiter. You can also be arrogant and supercilious. His arrogant and supercilious demeanor. A supercilious disregard for popular opinion. And you can describe a supercilious raising of an eyebrow. Let's talk about polemical. It means involving strong critical, controversial, or disputatious writing or speech. You mostly hear polemical essay, polemical tone, polemical writer, polemical attack on the government. You can also be highly polemical. A highly polemical debate. The book's polemical style divided critics. And you can engage in polemics about a hot-button issue. Let's talk about assuage. It means to make an unpleasant feeling less intense, to satisfy an appetite or desire. You mostly hear assuage guilt, assuage fears, assuage hunger, assuage concerns. You can also be partially assuage. The apology did little to assuage her anger. A gesture meant to assuage public outrage. And you can literally assuage thirst with a drink. Let's talk about antipathy. It means a deep-seated feeling of dislike, aversion. You mostly hear deep antipathy. Antipathy toward strangers. Mutual antipathy. Felt a strong antipathy. You can also be long-standing antipathy. A long-standing antipathy between the two families. His antipathy for any form of authority. And you can have a natural antipathy to a certain food. Let's talk about ennui. It means a feeling of listlessness and dissatisfaction arising from a lack of occupation or excitement. You mostly hear a sense of ennui. Suffered from ennui. Bourgeois ennui. The ennui of modern life. You can also be bored to the point of ennui. The endless meetings filled her with ennui. A vacation meant to relieve his ennui. And you can describe the quiet ennui of a Sunday afternoon. Let's talk about didactic. It means intended to teach, particularly in having moral instruction as an ulterior motive. You mostly hear didactic story, didactic purpose, didactic tone, didactic novel. You can also be overly didactic. His speaking style is overly didactic. A didactic approach that bores the audience. And you can describe a teacher's didactic method. Let's talk about sycophant. It means a person who acts obsequiously towards someone important to gain advantage. You mostly hear a sycophant. The ruler was surrounded by sycophants. Sycophantic behavior. Sycophantic praise. You can also be blatant sycophant. A blatant sycophant always flattering the boss. The sycophantic press coverage of the celebrity. And you can describe a person's sycophantic laughter. Let's talk about prevaricate. It means to speak or act in an evasive way, to avoid telling the truth directly. You mostly hear prevaricate on the issue. Accused of prevaricating. Stop prevaricating and answer the question. Prevaricate to save face. You can also be a master of prevarication. The minister was a master of prevarication. An answer that was pure prevarication. And you can contrast someone who is direct with someone who prevaricates. Let's talk about vapid. It means offering nothing that is stimulating or challenging, bland. You mostly hear vapid conversation. Vapid comments. Vapid celebrity culture. Vapid smile. You can also be utterly vapid. An utterly vapid television show. The vapid elegance of the party. And you can describe a vapid and meaningless compliment. Let's talk about torpor. It means a state of physical or mental inactivity, lethargy. You mostly hear a state of torpor. Fell into a torpor. Mental torpor. The heat-induced torpor. You can also be shake off the torpor. The loud noise shook him from his torpor. The long winter was a time of torpor for the animals. And you can describe the torpor of a hibernating bear. Let's talk about mendacious. It means not telling the truth, lying. You mostly hear mendacious politician. Mendacious statement. Mendacious propaganda. Mendacious by nature. You can also be proven mendacious. His account was proven mendacious. A mendacious and untrustworthy individual. And you can describe a report as a mendacious distortion of the facts. Let's talk about salubrious. It means health-giving, healthy. It can also mean pleasant or not run down. You mostly hear salubrious climate, salubrious air, salubrious effect, salubrious environment. You can also be not particularly salubrious. The neighborhood was not particularly salubrious. A salubrious diet of fresh vegetables. And you can contrast a salubrious place with a squalid one. Let's talk about mordant. It means especially of humor, having or showing a sharp or critical quality, biting. You mostly hear mordant wit, mordant satire, mordant sense of humor, mordant observation. You can also be delightfully mordant. Her delightfully mordant commentary on society. A mordant and cynical view of human nature. And you can describe a critic's mordant pen. Let's talk about abscond. It means to leave hurriedly and secretly, typically to escape from custody or avoid arrest. You mostly hear abscond with the money. Abscond from prison. Abscond in the dead of night. Abscond from responsibility. You can also be forced to abscond. The embezzler was forced to abscond. Absconding to a non-extradition country. And you can literally abscond with valuable documents. Let's talk about alacrity. It means brisk and cheerful readiness, eagerness. You mostly hear with alacrity. Accept an invitation with alacrity. Perform a task with alacrity. Agree with alacrity. You can also be surprising alacrity. She accepted the offer with surprising alacrity. The staff responded with alacrity to the request. And you can admire someone's alacrity in the face of a challenge. Let's talk about arduous. It means involving or requiring strenuous effort, difficult and tiring. You mostly hear arduous journey, arduous task, arduous process, arduous climb. You can also be physically arduous labor, an arduous trek through the mountains. And you can describe an arduous struggle for freedom. Let's talk about bombastic. It means high-sounding, but with little meaning, inflated or grandiose language. You mostly hear bombastic speech, bombastic politician, bombastic style, bombastic claims. You can also be full of bombastic rhetoric, a bombastic and self-important lecture, full of bombastic threats he couldn't possibly fulfill. And you can criticize a writer's bombastic prose. Let's talk about cacophony. It means a harsh, discordant mixture of sounds. You mostly hear a cacophony of sound, a cacophony of voices, a cacophony of car horns, a sudden cacophony. You can also be deafening cacophony, the deafening cacophony of the factory floor, a cacophony of conflicting opinions, and you can literally wake up to the cacophony of city traffic. To put yourself completely into one thing, dive into. Instead of dive into, you can say immerse. Dive into a book, or immerse yourself in a book. To avoid giving a straight answer, beat around the bush. Instead of beat around the bush, you can say equivocate. The politician beat around the bush, or the politician equivocated. To be unpredictable or moody, unpredictable. Instead of unpredictable, you can say capricious. Unpredictable weather, or capricious weather. To be wasteful with money, wasteful. Instead of wasteful, you can say profligate. Wasteful spending, or profligate spending. To be cheap or stingy, stingy. Instead of stingy, you can say parsimonious. A stingy person, or a parsimonious person. To complain in a whiny way, whiny. Instead of whiny, you can say querulous. A whiny child, or a querulous child. To be quiet and say little, quiet. Instead of quiet, you can say taciturn. A quiet man, or a taciturn man. To have a big hunger for something, devour. Instead of devour, you can say have a voracious appetite. Devour books, or be a voracious reader. Something out of its proper time, out of place. Instead of out of place, you can say an anachronism. An out-of-place object, or an anachronism. To deliberately avoid something, avoid. Instead of avoid, you can say eschew. Avoid technology, or eschew technology. To use very few words, brief. Instead of brief, you can say laconic. A brief reply, or a laconic reply. To be filled with bitter criticism, nasty. Instead of nasty, you can say vitriolic. A nasty comment, or a vitriolic comment. To be unrealistically idealistic, daydreaming. Instead of daydreaming, you can say quixotic. A daydreaming plan, or a quixotic plan. To be impossible to stop, unstoppable. Instead of unstoppable, you can say inexorable. An unstoppable force, or an inexorable force. To be generous in victory, generous. Instead of generous, you can say magnanimous. A generous winner, or a magnanimous winner. To cause something suddenly, trigger. Instead of trigger, you can say precipitate. Trigger a crisis, or precipitate a crisis. A person who attacks popular beliefs, rule breaker. Instead of rule breaker, you can say iconoclast. A creative rule breaker, or an iconoclast. To criticize someone harshly, criticize. Instead of criticize, you can say lambaste. Criticize the team, or lambaste the team. A favorable beginning, promising. Instead of promising, you can say auspicious. A promising start, or an auspicious start. A practical approach, practical. Instead of practical, you can say pragmatic. A practical solution, or a pragmatic solution. To deny or contradict, deny. Instead of deny, you can say gainsay. You cannot deny the truth, or you cannot gainsay the truth. To be very enthusiastic, enthusiastic. Instead of enthusiastic, you can say zealous. An enthusiastic supporter, or a zealous supporter. To respect highly, respect. Instead of respect, you can say venerate. Respect a hero, or venerate a hero. To be stubbornly uncooperative, uncooperative. Instead of uncooperative, you can say recalcitrant. An uncooperative child, or a recalcitrant child. Sharp and forthright speech, sharp. Instead of sharp, you can say acerbic. Sharp wit, or acerbic wit. To be stubborn and refuse to change, stubborn. Instead of stubborn, you can say obdurate. A stubborn refusal, or an obdurate refusal. To be reserved about your feelings, reserved. Instead of reserved, you can say reticent. He was reserved about his past, or he was reticent about his past. To be very talkative, talkative. Instead of talkative, you can say loquacious. A talkative guest, or a loquacious guest. Leadership or dominance over others, dominance. Instead of dominance, you can say hegemony. Cultural dominance, or cultural hegemony. To formally reject something, reject. Instead of reject, you can say abjure. Reject violence, or abjure violence. A snobbish attitude, snobbish. Instead of snobbish, you can say supercilious. A snobbish smile, or a supercilious smile. A critical and argumentative tone, argumentative. Instead of argumentative, you can say polemical. An argumentative essay, or a polemical essay. To soothe a feeling, soothe. Instead of soothe, you can say assuage. Soothe fears, or assuage fears. A deep-seated feeling of dislike, dislike. Instead of dislike, you can say antipathy. A deep dislike, or deep antipathy. A feeling of boredom and dissatisfaction, boredom. Instead of boredom, you can say ennui. A sense of boredom, or a sense of ennui. Intended to teach in a preachy way, preachy. Instead of preachy, you can say didactic. A preachy story, or a didactic story. A person who flatters to gain advantage, flatterer. Instead of flatterer, you can say sycophant. A constant flatterer, or a sycophant. To lie or avoid the truth, lie. Instead of lie, you can say prevaricate. Lie about the issue, or prevaricate on the issue. Something bland and boring, bland. Instead of bland, you can say vapid. A bland conversation, or a vapid conversation. A state of inactivity and lethargy, lethargy. Instead of lethargy, you can say torpor. A state of lethargy, or a state of torpor. A person who is not truthful, liar. Instead of liar, you can say mendacious. A liar or a mendacious person. Healthy and good for you, healthy. Instead of healthy, you can say salubrious. A healthy climate, or a salubrious climate. Sharp and critical humor, biting. Instead of biting, you can say mordant. Biting wit, or mordant wit. To leave secretly and quickly, flee. Instead of flee, you can say abscond. Flee with the money, or abscond with the money. Brisk and cheerful eagerness, eagerness. Instead of eagerness, you can say alacrity. He accepted with eagerness, or he accepted with alacrity. Involving strenuous effort, difficult. Instead of difficult, you can say arduous. A difficult journey or an arduous journey. Pompous and over-the-top language, pompous. Instead of pompous, you can say bombastic. A pompous speech or a bombastic speech. A harsh mixture of sounds, discord. Instead of discord, you can say cacophony. A discord of sounds or a cacophony of sounds. Here are example sentences for our list of words. Listen and repeat. Listen to these sentences. I must immerse myself in my studies to improve quickly. I have a voracious curiosity about the world, so I'm always asking questions. When my friend asks me a difficult question, I sometimes equivocate because I don't want to give a wrong answer. The weather here is so capricious. It's sunny one minute and pouring rain the next. My profligate spending on coffee last month left me with no money for books. I am parsimonious with my free time, so I only use it for the most important activities. The child became querulous and started whining when it was time to leave the playground. My new classmate is very taciturn, so I find it difficult to start a conversation with him. Seeing a typewriter in a modern office feels like an anachronism. To improve my health, I will eschew sugary drinks and only drink water. I appreciate my teacher's laconic instructions because they are clear and easy to remember. The critic's vitriolic review of the film made me not want to see it. My dream of becoming a famous actor is probably quixotic, but I will still try. The inexorable progress of technology means I must keep learning new skills. My teacher was magnanimous in victory after our class debate and praised my good points. A sudden political scandal can precipitate the fall of a government. As an iconoclast, she loves to challenge traditional teaching methods. My father will lambaste me if I fail my exams because he expects me to do well. The sunny weather is an auspicious start to our language learning trip. I need to be pragmatic about my goals. I can't become fluent in English in 1 month. You cannot gainsay the fact that daily practice is the best way to learn. He is a zealous supporter of our study group and always encourages everyone. In my culture, we venerate our elders and always seek their advice. The recalcitrant student refused to do his homework, no matter what the teacher said. Her acerbic sense of humor is funny, but it can sometimes hurt people's feelings. He was obdurate in his belief that his method was the only correct one. I am reticent to speak in English class because I'm afraid of making mistakes. My aunt is so loquacious that once she starts talking, it's hard to get her to stop. The hegemony of English as a global language is both an advantage and a challenge for learners. I have decided to abjure using online translators and will only use a dictionary. The supercilious look the fluent speaker gave me made me feel insecure. His polemical essay argued that grammar is unimportant, which started a big debate in class. Drinking a cup of tea helps to assuage my anxiety before a test. I feel a strong antipathy towards memorizing long lists of words without context. After studying for 6 hours straight, I was overcome with a feeling of ennui and couldn't focus anymore. The didactic nature of some children's shows is designed to teach lessons, not just to entertain. He is a sycophant who always agrees with the teacher just to get a better grade. Politicians often prevaricate when asked a direct question about a difficult topic. I find most television commercials to be vapid and uninteresting. After a large lunch, I often fall into a torpor and find it hard to study. The mendacious advertisement claimed I would become fluent in a week, which is a lie. Going for a walk in the park is a salubrious activity that clears my mind for studying. She has a mordant wit, and her sharp observations about language learning are very accurate. The thief managed to abscond with the valuable dictionary from the library. I accepted the invitation to the English Conversation Club with alacrity. Memorizing all the irregular verbs is an arduous but necessary task. The politician's bombastic speech was full of impressive words, but had no real substance. The city center was a cacophony of traffic, music, and people shouting.